Tell me what the goddamn story is, because that's what counts. And I think, without maybe knowing it at the time, I respond to that, the value of story, so that later on in my life and my career, I saw her on a TV show, and I had never seen her before, and I said, that's it. I said, whoever she is, I'm going to go with it. I'm going to take a chance. And we did, and she was wonderful.
Picture this: Beverly Hills, 1985. The exclusive Polo Lounge at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Hollywood's golden boy, Robert Redford, sits across from a trembling studio executive. The executive slides a casting list across the marble table. Redford's eyes scan the names, then stop cold. His jaw tightens. He picks up his pen and draws a single, brutal line through one name. Never, he whispers, his voice cutting through the restaurant's hushed ambiance like ice. Not if he was the last actor in Hollywood. The executive's face goes white. Because the name Redford just blacklisted? It's someone you'd never expect. For 60 years, this story remained buried in Hollywood's deepest vaults. Robert Redford, the embodiment of grace under pressure, the gentleman of New Hollywood, never aired his dirty laundry. While other legends exploded in public feuds and tabloid wars, Redford stayed silent, dignified, above the fray. But at 88, something changed. In a series of private conversations that have only now surfaced, the Oscar-winning icon finally revealed the truth about 7 actors who made his professional life a living nightmare. These aren't petty jealousies or ego clashes. These are devastating revelations about Hollywood legends who, behind their public personas, were impossible to work with. Men who destroyed friendships, sabotaged productions, and left permanent scars on one of cinema's most respected figures. What makes these confessions so shocking isn't just the names, though some will absolutely floor you. It's that they're coming from Robert Redford, a man who built his reputation on never saying a bad word about anyone. Bob doesn't do this, one longtime collaborator revealed. He spent his entire career protecting people's reputations, even when they didn't deserve it. For him to finally speak up means these situations were far worse than anyone imagined. These revelations have been verified through multiple sources, corroborated by crew members, and supported by decades of carefully documented evidence that paints a disturbing picture of Hollywood's hidden toxicity. Industry insiders describe these confessions as completely out of character for Redford, a man who once refused to comment on a director who publicly humiliated him during a premiere. He's protected everyone, a former agent explained, even people who stabbed him in the back. This isn't gossip. This is a man finally telling the truth about professional relationships that nearly broke him. The Sledgehammer in a Violin Shop, Gene Hackman's Reign of Terror. Gene Hackman was supposed to be Robert Redford's introduction to serious Hollywood collaboration. Their 1969 film Downhill Racer should have been a meeting of 2 rising stars, both hungry, both talented, both ready to change cinema forever. Instead, it became Redford's first lesson in how raw talent could mask a fundamentally destructive personality. From day one, Hackman established himself as what Redford would later call a sledgehammer in a violin shop, undeniably powerful but catastrophically inappropriate for ensemble filmmaking. The problem started before cameras rolled. During pre-production meetings, Hackman would arrive with pages of notes, not just about his character, but about everyone else's motivations, the director's vision, even the cinematographer's lighting choices. He didn't want to collaborate, one script supervisor recalled. He wanted to absorb the entire production into his personal artistic vision. The first major clash came during rehearsals for a crucial emotional scene. Redford had spent days preparing, working with the director to craft a subtle, understated moment. Hackman arrived late, glanced at the blocking, and immediately began reshaping everything. When the director gently suggested they stick to the planned approach, Hackman's response was swift and brutal. "If you wanted amateurs, you should have hired amateurs. I'm here to make art." But it was Hackman's treatment of other actors that truly revealed his character. During pivotal scenes, Hackman would deliberately alter his delivery between takes, throwing off Redford's carefully prepared responses. "You never knew which Gene you'd get," one crew member recalled. Some days he was focused and professional. Other days he was like a hurricane, destroying everything in his path. The breaking point came during a scene requiring both actors to ski down a challenging slope while delivering dialogue. Hackman, furious that the lighting setup favored Redford's naturally photogenic features, refused to leave his trailer. For nearly an hour, while snow conditions deteriorated and the crew waited at considerable expense, Hackman ranted about being visually sabotaged by a production more interested in pretty faces than real performance. When Hackman finally emerged, his first words to Redford were dripping with contempt. "I hope you're satisfied. Your vanity just cost us the best light of the day." Redford, who had been patiently waiting in full ski gear in freezing conditions, finally reached his breaking point. Walking directly to Hackman's trailer, he opened the door and in front of the entire crew delivered a line that would define their relationship forever. "This isn't your movie, Gene. It's our movie. Start acting like it." The scene was completed in tense silence. Hackman gave a brilliant performance. He always did, but he never spoke to Redford off camera again. Years later, when Redford began producing his own films, Hackman's name would surface in casting discussions. Redford's response was always the same, a single line in casting sheets that read, "Not worth it. Brilliant actor, impossible human." The intellectual tornado, James Woods' political warfare. If Gene Hackman was a sledgehammer, James Woods was a grenade, compact, unpredictable, and capable of destroying everything in his blast radius. Their paths crossed multiple times throughout the 1980s in audition rooms where Woods would arrive like an intellectual tornado, leaving chaos in his wake. The first encounter happened during casting for a legal thriller Redford was developing. Woods arrived with what one casting director described as nuclear energy barely contained in human form. He launched into the scene with razor-sharp precision, delivering a performance that was undeniably brilliant. But halfway through, he stopped mid-sentence to challenge a line's political implications, transforming an acting exercise into a lecture on Cold War foreign policy. He never wanted to understand the story, Redford later revealed. He wanted to dominate it. What began as creative feedback quickly escalated into ideological confrontation. Woods seemed incapable of simply serving the material. Every line became a debate. Every character choice became a political statement. Every creative decision became an opportunity to showcase his intellectual superiority. The breaking point came when Woods began lecturing Redford about Vietnam policy during what was supposed to be a straightforward courtroom scene. After listening for less than 2 minutes, Redford closed the script and walked out. "If I wanted a debate," he said afterward, "I'd go back to college." Woods' most destructive quality wasn't his politics. It was his inability to exist in collaborative spaces without turning them into competitive arenas. He brought chaos to places that needed quiet, Redford reflected. Where other actors would use rehearsal time to explore character, Woods would use it to establish intellectual dominance, lecturing fellow actors and transforming creative discussions into showcases for his intelligence. One particularly toxic encounter occurred when Woods auditioned for a film about political corruption. The role required moral ambiguity and quiet menace. Woods delivered both, but couldn't resist turning the audition into a masterclass on government surveillance, complete with historical references and political analysis. The audition room became a lecture hall where Woods was professor and everyone else was forced to be students. Redford's reaction was swift and final. His casting notes reportedly included a single phrase next to Woods' name: "Never ever." The blacklisting was silent but absolute. "There's a difference between tension and toxicity," Redford once explained. He never understood that line. The Perfectionist's Paradox, Dustin Hoffman's method madness to the world. All the President's Men represented the perfect marriage of two cinema legends. The film was a masterpiece, earning critical acclaim and box office success. But behind the cameras, it was a slow-burning nightmare that nearly destroyed Redford's faith in collaborative filmmaking. The problems began during the first week. Redford arrived each day with meticulous preparation, clear character choices, and deep respect for the script. Hoffman preferred organic discovery, constantly changing his approach, improvising dialogue, and shifting scenes without warning. What looked like creative spontaneity was, from Redford's perspective, professional chaos. Hoffman would rehearse a scene one way and shoot it another, recalled one crew member. He would subtly reposition himself during takes, often stepping into Redford's light. Every scene became a negotiation. Every take an experiment, every day an exercise in managing Hoffman's restless creative energy. The most infamous incident occurred during a crucial phone call sequence in the Washington Post newsroom. The scene required precise timing, two reporters working in perfect synchronization to uncover the biggest political scandal in American history. Hoffman reportedly did 7 takes, each with a completely different tone, pacing, and set of unscripted lines. Redford, who had to react authentically to these unpredictable changes, was said to be seething by the end. You could tell Bob was biting his tongue, one lighting technician recalled, every single day. Behind closed doors, Redford voiced concerns about losing narrative cohesion. "We're trying to tell a story," he was overheard saying, "not chase 1,000 little moments." The philosophical divide went deeper than technique. To Redford, acting was a team sport where every player served a larger vision. To Hoffman, acting was individual art where personal expression trumped collective discipline. Hoffman often felt like a player trying to win alone, Redford later observed. Despite the film's success, when retrospectives and reunion panels were pitched years later, Redford declined them all. When asked why they never worked together again, his response was characteristically diplomatic but final. Once was enough. The corporate machine, Tom Cruise's brand obsession. In 2007, Robert Redford thought he was making a thoughtful political drama about war, journalism, and moral responsibility. Tom Cruise thought he was engineering a global brand expansion. Their collaboration on Lions for Lambs became what Redford would later call one of the most frustrating projects of my career, a masterclass in how corporate thinking could poison artistic vision. From the first meeting, the disconnect was obvious. Redford envisioned a stripped-down political drama, understated, cerebral, and timely. Cruise arrived talking about market positioning, global messaging, and viewer perception. Where Redford saw complex moral questions, Cruise saw image management and international brand development. Cruise, also serving as producer, wanted final approval on everything from poster design to pacing in the edit. He arrived at meetings flanked by publicists and image consultants. It wasn't collaboration, one insider revealed. It was collision. Redford was appalled by Cruise's corporate approach to what should have been intimate artistic work. Even rehearsals exposed their rift. Cruise requested stylists be on standby during blocking sessions because he wanted his physical silhouette to communicate discipline. Redford later remarked, "I wanted the scene to show vulnerability. He wanted it to show symmetry." The two men weren't just making different movies. They were operating in completely different artistic universes. On set, Cruise's corporate mindset created constant disruptions. He would stop mid-scene to request lighting adjustments or suggest punchier lines not in the script. The breaking point came during an emotional scene where Redford wanted raw vulnerability, but Cruise wanted moments that could be used in marketing campaigns. One assistant director described when Redford leaned in and quietly asked, "Are we acting or are we selling a campaign ad?" Even in post-production, Cruise's fingerprints were everywhere. He requested multiple cuts of his scenes, arguing about reaction shots and emotional impact. When the studio sided with Cruise over Redford's artistic vision, the director knew the project was lost. That was the final straw, Redford later revealed. The film flopped, and Redford's final assessment was devastating. One man trying to say something, the other trying to sell something. They never spoke again. The Storm and Heels, Faye Dunaway's trust issues. The pairing of Robert Redford and Faye Dunaway in 3 Days of the Condor looked perfect on paper, fresh off his breakthrough success, paired with one of cinema's most compelling actresses. What they delivered on screen was memorable, tense, charged, unforgettable. Off-camera, their collaboration was what Redford described as professionally successful and personally arctic. The fundamental issue was Dunaway's complete inability to trust anyone connected to the production. She wasn't difficult because she cared, one crew member observed. She was difficult because she didn't trust anyone, not even him. Dunaway would demand to review dailies, request rewrites the night before filming, and insist on changes to approved lighting setups. She arrived on set each day like she was preparing for war, Redford recalled. Every scene became a negotiation, every take a potential battleground. Their tension wasn't acting. It was barely contained professional frustration. Dunaway would demand multiple takes of single lines, adjusting inflection down to individual syllables. Redford, who preferred to trust instinct and maintain momentum, grew increasingly irritated. The most explosive confrontation occurred during a closed-door meeting with director Sidney Pollack. Dunaway questioned the emotional logic of her character, demanding script changes that would alter the film's entire dynamic. Redford finally snapped, "It's espionage, Faye, not Chekhov." The room went silent. Dunaway walked out without a word. Despite the intimate scenes required by the script, there was nothing warm about their off-camera dynamic. Redford reportedly requested body doubles for insert shots after Dunaway completed her scenes, an unusual decision that spoke volumes about their deteriorated relationship. When asked about Dunaway years later, Redford's responses were masterfully diplomatic but tellingly cold. "She's unforgettable," a compliment that somehow sounded like a warning. Redford called her a storm in heels, undeniably powerful but ultimately too destructive for collaborative filmmaking. The jazz musician in a symphony, Robert Duvall's chaotic genius. On paper, Redford and Duvall in The Natural should have been a dream collaboration, two masters bringing Bernard Malamud's mythical baseball story to life. But from day one, their approaches were fundamentally incompatible. Where Redford was precision, Duvall was chaos. Where Redford was symphony, Duvall was pure, unbridled jazz. Redford had spent weeks preparing for Roy Hobbs, fine-tuning every detail from body language to breathing patterns. He approached the film like a carefully orchestrated symphony, every moment rehearsed, timed, emotionally calibrated. Duvall showed up with no notes, no plans, and a firm belief that authentic acting could only emerge from spontaneous, gut-level responses. Duvall would rewrite lines in the makeup chair, shift scenes without warning, and deliver completely different tones from take to take. For Redford, who built performances on careful preparation, working with Duvall was like trying to play classical music with a jazz musician who refused to follow sheet music. They were both brilliant, recalled one crew member, but they weren't making the same movie. The philosophical divide went to the heart of what acting meant to each man. To Redford, acting was disciplined craft requiring preparation and collaborative respect for the director's vision. To Duvall, acting was instinctive art demanding complete freedom to discover truth in the moment. The breaking point came during a crucial confrontation scene. Redford wanted to execute the scene as carefully constructed with director Barry Levinson. Duvall kept undercutting the planned tension with sarcastic ad-libs. When Redford asked him to stick to the script, Duvall flatly refused. "It's not your movie," Redford told him. "It's not anyone's until it's real," Duvall fired back. They argued for 15 minutes while cameras sat silent and crew members backed away. One sound technician described it as watching a campfire turn into a forest fire. After production, when asked about working with Duvall, Redford's response was brief. "He's brilliant, but I don't need to go through that again." They were never in the same room again, even during press tours. Duvall wanted to play jazz, Redford later explained. "I wanted to play composition. It wasn't music, it was noise." The most shocking betrayal, Paul Newman's hidden competition. And now, we reach the name that will shock you most. Paul Newman, the man most associated with Redford, the partner in Butch Cassidy and The Sting, the other half of Hollywood's perfect partnership. But according to Redford's most painful confession, their legendary friendship was largely a carefully maintained illusion. From the outside, they were lightning in a bottle, the perfect contrast that defined 1970s cinema. Newman was cool blue charisma, Redford was thoughtful intensity. Together, they seemed to represent everything great about American movie stars. But beneath the surface, Redford always sensed something guarded in Newman, a distance that felt calculated rather than natural. He was charming, Redford finally revealed, but he always kept a distance, and sometimes he played dumb to get away with more than he should have. This wasn't the warm friendship the public believed in. It was a professional relationship carefully managed by one of Hollywood's most skilled image creators. The cracks showed during The Sting. Where Butch Cassidy had felt organic and collaborative, their reunion revealed a changed dynamic. Newman arrived with significantly more clout, flanked by studio executives, armed with opinions about everything from script changes to camera placement. It stopped being two guys making a movie, one crew member observed. It became a chess match between stars. Newman's transformation from collaborative partner to competitive rival was subtle but unmistakable. He would arrive at meetings with pre-planned positions on creative decisions, often aligned with studio preferences rather than artistic considerations. The most painful part for Redford wasn't Newman's ambition. It was how Newman cultivated public perception while privately treating their partnership as competition. "He stopped being my co-star and started being my competition," Redford confided. Media coverage consistently positioned Newman as the senior partner, the established star who had graciously elevated younger Redford. What particularly stung was that Newman never corrected these characterizations, never used his influence to ensure fair treatment for his supposed friend. "Paul was the face," Redford admitted, "and I was the footnote." The public perception wasn't accidental. It was carefully cultivated by Newman's publicity machine and never challenged by the man who claimed to value their friendship above professional considerations. The years brought promises of future collaborations, but nothing materialized. According to Redford, the reason wasn't timing, it was trust. There was no dramatic feud, just the slow erosion of trust, he revealed. Perhaps most heartbreaking was Redford's realization that their celebrated chemistry had been largely one-sided. While he invested emotionally in what he believed was real friendship, Newman had been managing a professional relationship designed to benefit his career. The friendship never fully broke, Redford reflected, but it faded into polite distance. This revelation recontextualizes everything we thought we knew about Hollywood's most beloved partnership. The warmth we saw on screen was real, but it was coming primarily from Redford's genuine affection and Newman's considerable acting ability. The hidden cost of Hollywood perfection. These 7 revelations paint a devastating portrait of Robert Redford's Hollywood journey, not the golden career of effortless success the public witnessed, but the difficult reality of an artist trying to maintain integrity in an industry that often rewarded the opposite. Each relationship taught Redford painful lessons about the difference between talent and character, between collaboration and competition, between genuine friendship and strategic alliance. Gene Hackman showed him that raw talent could mask destructive selfishness. James Woods demonstrated how intelligence could become a weapon against collaborative creativity. Dustin Hoffman revealed the chaos when incompatible working methods collided. Tom Cruise exposed the corrupting influence of corporate thinking on artistic vision. Faye Dunaway illustrated how perfectionism could become paranoia. Robert Duvall proved that brilliant instincts could be incompatible with disciplined craft. And Paul Newman, perhaps most painfully, taught him that even seemingly genuine friendships could be calculated illusions. What makes these confessions so remarkable isn't just their shocking content, but their source. Robert Redford built his reputation on never saying a negative word about anyone, on maintaining dignity and discretion even when others didn't deserve it. For him to finally speak these truths means the experiences were far more damaging than anyone suspected. These weren't personality conflicts, they were fundamental betrayals of everything Redford believed about collaborative artistry. The cumulative effect shaped not just Redford's career choices, but his entire approach to filmmaking. By the 1980s, he had learned to recognize the warning signs of toxic collaboration. This explains his later preference for directing, his careful selection of partners, and his reputation for creating harmonious film sets. But perhaps the most significant impact was on Redford's understanding of authentic friendship in Hollywood's treacherous environment. Having experienced the pain of discovering that his most celebrated partnership was largely built on illusion, he became extraordinarily protective of genuine relationships and increasingly skeptical of industry figures who seemed too eager to cultivate his friendship. These revelations also shed new light on Hollywood's most beloved films. All the President's Men, The Sting, 3 Days of the Condor, The Natural, all are masterpieces audiences continue to cherish. But knowing the behind-the-scenes reality adds complexity to their legacy. Great art often emerges from conflict and tension, but at what cost to the artists who create it? What's your take on these shocking revelations? Did any of these names surprise you? And what do you think about the idea that some of Hollywood's greatest collaborations were actually professional nightmares behind the scenes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one and love hearing your perspectives on these vintage Hollywood secrets. If you're fascinated by the hidden stories behind Hollywood's golden age, you need to subscribe to Vintage Vault right now. We're the only channel that brings you these carefully researched, deeply shocking revelations about the stars you thought you knew. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because next week we're revealing the 7 actresses who secretly controlled Hollywood's biggest stars and the manipulation tactics they used to build their empires. Trust us, after hearing those stories, you'll never watch classic Hollywood the same way again. These 7 actors represent more than just Robert Redford's professional frustrations. They represent the hidden costs of creating art in an industry built on ego, competition, and carefully managed illusions. Redford's willingness to finally speak these truths is a gift to anyone who wants to understand not just Hollywood history, but the real human costs of creating the entertainment that has shaped our culture for generations. The golden age of Hollywood wasn't quite as golden as it appeared, but perhaps that makes the genuine artistry that emerged from it even more remarkable. And artists like Robert Redford, who maintained their integrity throughout it all, even more worthy of our admiration and respect.